Because I tell you right now, and mark my words, right? 5 years from now, it will be incredibly difficult and expensive to hire a talented African. Have you ever met an African that is not an entrepreneur, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like in the traditional sense.
In the traditional sense, everyone is an entrepreneur. They're striving. They want a better life. They want a better job. They want a better technology. They want better of everything. We would never tell a company, well, because this is Ghana, so you can pay them less. You know what I mean? We have skilled developers that are making $2,000 a month. Are you kidding me? No one can live in Ghana today with $2,000 a month. Are you insane?
Thank you for sitting with me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you making time out of your busy schedules. I mean, we kept on going back and forth on the time to meet, and finally we got to settle on something. All right, so I would want you to sort of introduce yourself and then share with us your background and your background leading up to where you are currently.
Yeah, so my name is Gimbala Sankare. I born and raised in Ghana. I was born and raised in Nima. I grew up in Nima. I was in Nima until I was 13 years when I left Ghana. I went to the US, living in the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx. Went to school in the Bronx. So I came in middle school, so 7th grade in the US, and went through high school. And I've had a very interesting path and career and development, while in the US, while I was in high school. I started working for Hillary Clinton when she was a senator in New York, working in immigration as an intern. Worked in the presidential campaign in 2008, ended up at the State Department, doing public affairs, public diplomacy work, when the Obama administration came to power. So I've done that, and throughout at that same time, going through college, doing my undergraduate. So I have a degrees in international relations and political science, in finance, and in public administration, a master's in public administration as well. So it's just a diverse of degrees and educational, technical experiences. And then I went into the U.S. Army, spent 4 years in the U.S. Army, doing U.S. Army work, as they say, and then came back to the State Department, doing consular work, so visa, passport, type work. After I transitioned from the Army, so I did a stint in Afghanistan, doing intel type work, and then so that it was a very good experience to have, to be in that environment and understand the different challenges that exist being in a combat zone and all of that, and then came back to the State Department, did consular work, and at the end of 2016, so the election in 2016 was my last day my last time at the State Department, and went into the private sector since then, and I went in as a recruiter in the private sector, so recruiting talent to join our company, and then soon became recruiting manager, led my teams, and start to grow the function, and then start to lead the organization in talent acquisition. So at some point I had about 40 people across the globe that I was managing, a bunch of recruiters. And then I left, that organization. I was going into consulting, and then I got a call from the NBA to come be their head of talent acquisition. So I went to the NBA, doing that work to build the function and help them really, set up a best-in-class talent acquisition organization while doing that. So did that for a few years. So another great experience, right? So it allows me to be able to pivot into sports and entertainment, get a great experience through that. And then, but I've been around through that spaces, and now I'm leading. We created Adjuma here in Ghana through that time. with the whole focus of really building a tech organization that allows us to connect, millions of Ghanaians, if not Africans, across the continent to employers across the globe. And part of that is really, I came to Ghana one time. I had a trip one time, and in 2019 actually, and some of my classmates that we went to school here, I went to St. Cecilia, were around, and we got into discussions around, what are they doing? And some of them are very well skilled, experienced, had certifications in tech, coding, building all of these different platforms, but there were no jobs for them to actually do it, and which was, I realized very quickly, was the largest story across the country. So many Ghanaian youths that have a lot of education, but not a lot of hands-on experience. And then, the lack of opportunities, there's stagnation, right? There's no movement for them to do anything. And then we also recognized that there was a problem in how people were finding jobs here in Ghana, right? Where the jobs that you find is because you knew somebody, right? To find those jobs. And we wanted to eliminate that, to close that opportunity gap. And then we also looked at, if you look at these national services opportunities and all of that, right, the collaboration between the government and the private sector was very minimal and almost to non-existent, right? So yes, you do the national service, but what happens after that? What happens to the alumni of those folks that go through a national service? How are we incentivizing the business community to employ these people that they've just had with them for 6 months and all of that? So those are the challenges, those are the questions that we were asking, which led us to create Adjuma. And when we launched Adjuma back in March of 2024, it was just like, hey, let's see what this is going to do. And within the first few weeks, 15 different countries of engagement within the platform. We had over 3,000. Today we're sitting over 3,000 talent within the platform, looking for jobs and all of that. And what we've done too is we are working with companies outside of Ghana, in Dubai, all across Europe, and some in the US, to look at the talent that we have on our database, and we provide those talents to them. So some of these people are going to get opportunities to be able to transfer and move over to these countries and work with these employers, and some of them will have an opportunity to work remotely as well with those employers. So it's been a fantastic journey so far, and we're looking forward to continue to grow the platform.
Everything you said has answered like most of the questions I was going to ask you. But then, since you brought up Adjuma, I would want to ask you this. We know that Ghana is a low trust society, especially when it comes to remote workers. Like trusting somebody to be able to get a job done on time, and then also trusting them with company information, like all of that. In this case, Adjuma is basically like a filtering system where you are deciphering which talent is good for which company. So then how are you dealing with like really connecting the right talent to the right companies and making sure that these people are the right, like they are right for these companies and going to make sure that the job is done and basically satisfy your client?
Yeah, look, it's very difficult to measure someone's intent, whether or not they're going to be trustworthy or not. But what we do is look at the skill sets that they have and the history and the background that they have, right? And on their CV and the conversations that our teams are having with them. When an employer posts a job or approaches us about posting a job, there's an entire team that is vetting candidates as they come through the platform. We vet these candidates and make sure that they meet the minimum qualifications and the skill set, and before we pass them off to additional reviews to the hiring manager and other folks within the pipeline. So we want to make sure that, and you notice this, right? When you post a job in Ghana, thousands of people are applying, right? So what the platform does is, we have tools in it where, folks will be able to, measure their skill set and get a score that will get passed over to the hiring manager. And then we also have, tools. I wouldn't necessarily say that there's AI tools that is going to filter out or anything like that, because some of those things can be biased.
Yeah.
So we try to mitigate as much as that as possible. And as we continue to refine those tools, we'll make it available to hiring managers. But we talk to these candidates, we look at their CVs, and we make sure that they have the minimum skill sets before we pass them over to the hiring managers. Some hiring managers will tell us, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is what the answer needs to look like when they answer you back. And that's perfect, right? So they don't want to talk to them, they want us to talk to them. And then we'll do that and we'll push them forward. Some of the European companies and outside Ghana companies are very much focused on, does this person understand or speaks English well?
Yeah.
Do they understand the complexity and critical thinking, and cognitive analysis of some of these things? They can do that. Most of them have tools that they can measure whether or not someone is being productive or not. But at the end of the day, look, you can't measure really the intent of whether or not someone's going to be truthful or not. I even struggle with that on my team, right? Where we have about 30 people employed in the company today. And as you can imagine, you're always asking, well, is this person truly doing, what they're supposed to be doing, But that's part of the risk, right? But what they need to understand is, they are part of the story, and that if they are not pulling their weight, one, it impacts the overall business and everybody in their team. But then two, they are doing themselves a disjustice, right? Because when we find out, then you're probably not going to be employed, right? So those are conversations that we do. But from a talent perspective, we try to meet the minimum qualifications. So review and be involved in the process for the hiring managers before we post anything.
Oh, that's great. So I have a couple of stats here. So Africa's population is currently 1.53 billion. It's the youngest and fastest growing in the world. And they are saying that by 2050, this population will double. And urban areas will basically triple in size. So over the next 8 years, in terms of global population, that will be 3 billion in addition, with sub-Saharan Africa contributing 2.7 billion. So that is basically accounting for 87% of that. So in your opinion, based on your experience and everything that you've sort of encountered as you build Adjuma, how would you describe the future of work in Africa?
Look, I know you're not going to meet anyone as bullish as I am about what we can do as Africans. And the reason why I'm sitting at Adjuma is one of many companies that we have in our portfolio, because we believe, I am so bullish about what we can do and what the continent can do and the talent that exists in the continent. The one statistics that, I thought you were going to mention, but you didn't mention, right? If you think about the majority of eligible workers in the continent, right? I'd say maybe 70-75% of them are under the age of 35 years old, right? In this continent today.
Yeah, Africa's median age is 19.
Right, yeah, so think about that, right? So the next frontier of global development and growth, economic development and growth, is going to come from this continent.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I have it here. So the youthful population, if our median age is 19, it means that the youthful population of African countries will contribute more new workers to the global workforce over the next decade than any other region.
Any other region, right?
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask you that, how is Adjuma coming in on this?
Well, that's exactly what our business model is based off, right? We recognize that there is untapped talent in the continent, and that the next generation of growth is going to come from this continent. That's why we are already approaching employers outside of this continent to say to them, listen, there is a plethora of really great talent that's already sitting there, and you want them to be with your organization so that they can start to gain the foundational experience that they need before the critical time reaches that you don't have access to them anymore. If I'm an employer that I'm sitting out in the West, this is the time that I'm going to be investing in talent in Africa. This is the time I'm going to be creating an infrastructure to have a remote workforce in the continent. Because I tell you right now, and mark my words, right? 5 years from now, it will be incredibly difficult and expensive to hire a talent in Africa. They are, African talents are much more digitally savvy. Have you ever met an African that is not an entrepreneur? Right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like in the traditional sense.
In the traditional sense.
Everyone.
Yeah, everyone is an entrepreneur. They're striving. They want a better life. They want a better job. They want a better technology. They want better of everything.
Yeah.
So there's that drive that's going to push them to create and expand economies at a faster rate than any other society out in the West. Right? So for us, we believe that we're positioned appropriately to address some of these changes and demographic transition that's coming, to work with employers, to say to them, listen, this is the time to do it. There is talent out there that is willing and able and ready to come over and learn and develop and continue to grow and add value to your bottom line, right? If you're not doing that, if you're not focused on the continent today, what's going to happen is you're going to have the companies that have already recognized those opportunities that are going to move in and start to create those infrastructure, and start to create that ecosystem for the talent to be successful. Yeah, and these conversations, I'm telling you, I have these conversations every single time. I was in Hamburg 2 weeks ago. I met with 50 organizations who were talking about employment and all of that. Because if you go to Germany, if you go to most of these large countries in Europe, they're struggling to find skilled laborers, right? And I said to them, it's like, look, you're missing the plot here, right? There's a plethora, there's a pool of talent that's sitting in Ghana, in Nigeria, and all of those things, right? That it's only 4 or 5 hours away, right? And at this point, labor is cheap, right? So if you're not thinking about creating those infrastructures, you're going to be missing the plot. Now, selfishly, I am doing this because I want Ghana to develop. I want Africa to develop. I want us to be able to have the standard of living close, if not better, than what you will get if you were to leave the country. So, yeah, I want to see that. And I think there's an opportunity to see that. If you look at the development of Ghana between 2010 to 2016, 2017, 2018, in a normal course of economic growth and a digital transformation, there are specific steps that each economy goes through. Okay, you have to have internet, and then once you have internet, you have to have stable electricity. Once you have stable electricity, you have to have, companies that create, internet-worthy, gigabyte type, broadband type content, and so on and so forth. Ghana skipped a lot of those levels, right? We went from, in 2010, when you came to this country, you barely have one telco that was providing you with a good DSL service. And look at where we are today, right? Look at where we are today. So
we're evolving.
Yeah, we're evolving faster than anybody than any country or any continent out in the West.
Great. So from my research, and even, my own personal experience, even though unemployment is a problem, but I also think that a more prevalent problem is underemployment. So, according to some stats, 30% of the population is classified as working poor. So they're working all right, but then they're not really making much. So in this case, the mark of success will be the income, not necessarily the employment itself.
Right.
Yeah. So how does Adjuma address challenges like this in terms of bargaining for what talents are worth when it comes to?
We are, and this is a personal philosophy for the company, right? We would never tell a company, well, because this is Ghana, so you can pay them less.
Happens a lot.
You know what I mean? My team, and I give you full, you can talk to anybody. We pay, as a startup company, we pay better than any other startup company that I've known in Ghana, right? Because I know the worth of that talent, right? My software designers, engineers, and all of that, my business developers and all of that, they make more in a month I have people on my team that are making 12,000 Ghana cedis a month,
That's a
right?
lot.
But to me, that is nothing. That's still cheap, right? So when we advise companies, we advise them based on what the global value of that talent is going to be delivered. Now, obviously, there's currency differentiation that you have to take into account. But why are we telling companies, oh, well, you can pay them less because of Ghana? We're doing ourselves an injustice, right? So when we talk to companies, we expect them, to be paying what the value to market, what that rate is going to. Now, obviously, the currency will take some of that away here and there, but you have to get close to what the going rate is going to be in a global marketplace. And I've heard those stories where HR managers, HR advisors,
They do it a lot.
They do it a lot and say, oh, you don't have to pay them.
Pay them a lot, just pay them something.
We have skilled developers that are making 2,000 a month. Are you kidding me? No one can live in Ghana today with 2,000 a month. Are you insane? Dude, come on. So those are the things that are part of the consultations that we have, and we'll be very real with them. If one company can't pay, another company does, and then we sort out those companies that can pay. And if I am not paying my employees, market rate or better, then they're not going to deliver the services that I need to be able to attract, better companies here. If you work at Adjuma, you get paid well. You come in, there's a chef that's providing you lunch if you're in the office multiple times a week. Some employers will take them on trips and stuff like that. We have constantly team meetings, where the folks are engaged and, are fed and transportation, all these things.
I saw a PS5 in the room.
Yeah, you saw a lounge. And the lounge continues to grow, right? We have games and that's the culture, right? The culture that we created, it mimics any tech culture that you go to when you're outside the country, because that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be that because this is Ghana, because this is Africa, we need to,
people.
we need to, shortchange people and do that way. No, that's not the global market rate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to ask you, so do you think the future of work is digital migration, where you have people here working for companies abroad, or you also see the development and migration of traditional jobs from an informal sort of sector to like a formal one? Now, the reason I ask this is because during your Reagan interview, you were talking about even the gole seller on the roadside. You want to get him, or you want to get her on like Adjuma to also connect. So how would you explain that?
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to go back to the model that we had the pre-pandemic, where you see the 5-day-a-week in office, on site, the formal aspects of working in office. I think the future of work is much more desegregated. You will have a more remote, more hybrid type workplace than anything else. And then you start to look at, it's a skills-based, or it's going to be a skills-based future workforce or economy more than anything else, right? And the reason why I say that, and it goes back to some of the conversations that I've had, if you look at the watch seller that's standing on the road, right? It's an informal type business, but at the core of it, that person knows, okay, this is what expense looks like, this is what profit, this is revenue, this is all of these things, right? They understand also the competition, right, with the other watch sellers, in the neighborhood. They understand how to differentiate the product that they provide and all of that. They didn't go to school for that.
Yeah, they also learn like service.
They learn the services and all that. They didn't go to school for that. So as employers, when we think in the future and we think about, all right, what is that ideal talent that we want in our organization? It's not going to be, the first thing is not going to be, what, did they go to this school? Did they have these grades? It's, do they have this skill set, to be able to do that? So when I talk to the team as we were developing the platform, it's like, okay, let's not, ignore these informal workers that are out in the economy today, right? Because they also have the skill set that is needed to continue to grow the economy, right? I don't want to get into politics, but the incoming government is talking about a 24-hour economy, right? Why is that important, right? If you think about, today, if you work, let's say you work in a hospital and you had a night shift, right? Early in the morning when you're leaving work, most businesses are not open.
Yeah.
But think about that. Think about when you're coming out of work, at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, there are specific businesses that's catering to that type of person that is coming out of that work.
Yeah.
That's why the informal economy is important, right? You want to be able to attract those people and build an ecosystem for them to serve those type of population, right?
Yeah.
You have a high-tech employee that is working, all throughout the hours to develop a particular product or anything like that. They also need the medical services at 2 a.m. They need the restaurants to be open. They need the trash, pickups and all of these different things, right? Those things are important. The sanitation pickups, they can happen outside of regular work hours, right? And it's much more efficient that way, right?
Yeah.
So that's why those things are important. So it's not too ridiculous to think that you can have a 24-hour economy, because that's where the future workforce is going.
Great. What do you think people get wrong about jobs in Africa?
That the talent doesn't know what they're doing, right? Jobs in Africa, people are lazy, are not committed to, the work. They don't know, the technology or anything like that. And I think it's incredibly wrong. And I've witnessed it, myself, right? With the folks that I work with, there's no programming language that they don't know, right? Yeah, now they may not have necessarily used it, right, every day, but they know the languages, right? And what's key that I see today that I don't see anywhere else. If you talk to an African employee and you said to them, listen, we need to develop X, Y, and Z, the basics. I don't know if you know the rest. I guarantee you, if you give them an opportunity, they will go research and learn it, right? Everybody's learning in this continent.
Yeah.
Everyone is learning, right? And it's not just like they're just learning, things that are not important. They're learning things to be able to make a livable wage and so on, right? And when you talk about education, we live in a society where education is highly valued, right? Everybody wants to go to school.
Yeah.
Everybody goes to school. I meet people that have PhDs and all of these things, and I was like, okay, so what is the hands-on experience that you have? And they don't have any because they value the school more first, right, than anything else. So I say to companies, I was like, look, just because you can't find someone that meets 100% of your spec, you will find someone that meets 60 or 70% of your spec. And I guarantee you, if you give them the opportunity to learn, they will learn and get to that 100%. If you give them some coaching, some mentoring here and there, they will get there. Put the challenge in front of them. They will get there for you.
So when you look at, this is not part of my script, but like based on the trajectory of our conversation, when you look at the global south, how does I don't know if maybe you are exposed, but I'm sure you are, how does the Asian part compare to the African part? The reason why I asked this is because recently I was scrolling through Twitter and then I saw I think Nigerians talking about how these days recruiters are very specific as to where they want to recruit from. And most of the jobs that ordinarily would have come to maybe Nigerian developers or something like that are rather now going to the Asians, whether it's the Indians or so how does that compare?
It comes down to dollars and cents, right? Dollars and cents, right? Where can I grow my business at a cost-effective rate, but also fast? Right. The thing about the Asian economies is they move very quickly. Right. India is a very good example. Right. If you put a business in India, the labor is cheap because they've restructured that entire economy to be a service economy. Right.
Yeah.
So labor is cheap, and you will get the product much quicker than you would anywhere else, with a lot of quality too. Right. How did they get there? Well, they got there because, they had great partners in the West, right? They had great diplomatic relationships where they were able to create visa opportunities for their students to go abroad and learn these skills and come back and work in those countries. How many Indian CEOs do we have in the United States?
A lot.
Right? And then if you think about that, so that entire economy, there's subsidies that are created for that economy, for businesses to be able to hire their own Indians and provide them companies with opportunities to grow products and grow their business. And it's fast, right? That's where the differentiating piece is between the Asian economy, and you can talk about the Latin American economy, South America, and Africa, right? The challenge that I see that we have is, even though we have smart people, we have smart developers, engineers, content creators, and all of these different things, we've created economies that sometimes create obstacles for us. We have more regulations, like almost stifling innovation in a way. So our employees, our talent are not used to, the apps or the efficiencies theories or the experiences that you would normally see outside of the continent. Right? So I'll give you a very good example. My team and I were deliberating on a particular product that we want to launch. I know the product very well, and they understand the concept on the product. They understand the concept, but they've never seen something like that, right? And if you think about how you innovate, sometimes in your imagination, you can imagine something, but having that visual experience is very important to be able to design and all of that. That's where we're losing, right? We're losing because we're not acclimated with seeing some of these, we're not being exposed to some of the apps that exist out, some of these theories and efficiencies. And then in turn, what it does is it limits our opportunity to be innovative and creative, and somewhat, stuck behind in terms of some of our designs and all of that. But at the core of it is really regulations, right? We've never really created, the governments, economy of scale of governments, right? That will say, look, you have an idea, just come, let's help you. And if anything, you go to any government institution, or the first thing they're gonna ask you, well, do you have a license? And it's like, well, I don't have a license. I'm a new, entrepreneur, new startup company, and you're asking for a license. The license costs, thousands of Ghana cedis or dollars in a way, right? Or they'll tell you, you need to have this certificate, right? If you go get this certificate, that's $15,000. Like, how are you gonna afford that, right? So those are what I mean by, we're creating obstacles for ourselves that you don't see when you leave the continent, when you leave Ghana, right? When you go out in the West, as a new business, as a small business or a startup company or anything like that, you're not paying taxes if you're not generating any revenue.
It's incentivized.
It's incentivized. The tax code is incentivized for you to create, spend money,
be innovative.
And innovate. At the end of the year, you file your taxes. If you spend expenses, some of them can be refunded back from the government, right? Those are incentives that our government is not thinking about, right? We don't have those structures. So if I'm a business, I'm thinking about all of those things, right? Where can I put that business? What is the ease of regulation there? What are the fees associated with that, right? And is the talent pool available for me to be able to do that? If you can answer yes to all of those questions, then you know exactly where you're gonna go, right? And that's where we're missing, right? Yes, we have a pool of talent, but we don't have the structures, the economies of scale. We don't have enough of the less regulations to allow for these businesses to come in and connect to that talent.
Yeah, this is great. Because when I think about what you are doing with Adjuma, basically you are sort of like an infrastructure builder.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that we always complain about is the fact that there is lack of infrastructure.
Yeah.
So if I were to get a job, maybe I'll probably be on LinkedIn trying to find, or I would reach out to somebody. Do you know this? Do you know this person? But then there's a case that you are building an infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Even though it's a business, but then first of all, it's an infrastructure that would link somebody who doesn't have a job to sort of get a job. So
and if you think about the LinkedIn's and some of these platforms that were created out in the West, they don't have the local nuances. They don't understand.
Yeah, they don't understand the local context.
Yeah, exactly, right. So the challenge that you have is if you're Ghanaian looking for jobs and you go on LinkedIn, what you're seeing usually is out of date, right? There's not enough information. You can't compete, because it's open to global, right? And no one really, it's a big company. No one is really focused on all of that. Our platforms were built by Ghanaians, are managed by Ghanaians on a daily basis. If you, there have been instances where people will submit as they build their profile, they submit a CV and it's all messed up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, folks on my team will call them and be like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, put in your CV, let's help you, let's give you these details. You put in.
So in this case, is this also like embedded in a business where you are sort of helping like talents to hone their CVs?
Absolutely. It's all part of the development, right? So you can go out and seek for a job if you are not necessarily ready, right? The packaging of yourself, right? It's not necessarily ready. I learned a word this week in Ghana through the whole Shatawale. It's a settings. It's all about settings, right? Yeah. So your settings need to be right, and that's what we do, right? We have conversations with talent and talk about, hey, your CV this, your CV that. And what we hope to do in the future is partner with a lot of the higher education institutions where we can be on campus, provide much more of these learnings and all of these different things, and get you set up for a global economy. Yeah,
this is good. I'm sure you know about Old School in Nigeria, for instance, where it's basically they teaching young Ghanaians tech skills and stuff like that. Do you think Adjuma would go into that direction where you have you bring people in and then you sort of teach them certain skills that are demanded in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a bunch of friends that work in corporate America and some of these companies that are eager, and some of them are asking me, hey, can I
bring people in?
We want to do. So we're looking at sometime next spring. We'll do a little. Do a workshop, a couple of days where we'll introduce some of these folks that will come in and they will do, these workshops and trainings and all of that. Additionally, we have a foundation as a company, my own family foundation. So through the foundation, we pay scholarships for folks to learn education and all these different things. We also focus on the empowerment of women, right? So we help other women entrepreneurs that have businesses, we'll help them, with some funding and capital, they can go in and run their businesses. Housing is another issue, right? So through the foundation, we have a real estate portfolio where we're building multifamily units to address housing. Food scarcity is another issue, so we have programs that will be addressing that, and climate change is another issue that we are going to be introducing, more clean buses and stuff like that to help with public transportation and all of that. So it's all part of, right? So you talked about, when you asked about infrastructure, that's a lot of where we're focused on. Specifically for me, I'm not someone that likes to wait for government to do something and get their act together, right? We have the means to be able to do it. We have people that are interested in doing some of these things. So let's give them an opportunity to do that. So the money that comes into the company, 20% of that goes back into the foundation, and it feeds and it does all of these other initiatives, right? Because it's important for us to be able to do all of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How do you say work has evolved in Ghana, considering everything you've seen in your experience? Because I think that back then everybody wanted to be in an office, air-conditioned office, sitting down by chilling. Now A lot
No,
of
it's
people
not
don't.
like that. Yeah, it's not about. I mean, you're in my office today.
Yeah.
You know, we have a big campus, 7 rooms. You know, different rooms. On a regular week, only half of the rooms are being used to the point that we're converting some of them into studios, right? But that's okay. With the type of work that we do, that's okay, right? And that's the evolution of work. You can't expect the best talent is not going to go sit in an office for 5 days a week, 8 to 5, sitting in the office. Think about the lack of infrastructure that exists in Ghana today, right? There's no very minimal public transportation, right? The cost of, right? The good internet, right? Cost of food and fuel and all of these things. So employers have to think creatively about what is that. It's much easier sometimes to allow that employee to work from home. Maybe they'll take a little bit less pay with the flexibility to be able to work from home. Because think about it, they don't have to pay for transportation and all these expenses. And so we factor all of that in, right? We've paid subsidies to our employees for transportation, food, and all of these different things. Like, we're living the model of what the future of workplace looks like in Ghana, and then repurposing some of our offices for other industries, right? For other opportunities, for people that need it the most, right? We have content creators that can't afford studios. Well, guess what? I have empty rooms in my buildings. Let's convert it to a studio, right? Let's make that accessible for them. And guess what? From a business perspective, that's an additional, revenue that's coming in, differently. And then, you trust your employees that they're going to be doing work, and you push them, to work remotely. Give them the tools, so we give them the computers and what they need. And then, if we can pay extra costs for electricity and internet, we do that, right? So that's what I was telling you, the salaries for some of the folks on the team is high because we take into account, okay, you have to do, sometimes you have to pay for internet, you have to pay for electricity. And then if you have to come to the office, it's transportation needs and all of that. That's unheard of. And when you come in, there's a chef that brings you lunch. If you come in, at breakfast, you might get breakfast. If you work late, we've had instances where the tech team will stay and do multiple days marathon. They get fed. They're here, they sleep around the office and all of that. That's the future of workplace. Now, I understand that not every business is able to do that. But there's ways to be able to sit back and look at your business and say, how do I make it more flexible to be able to attract the best talent, right? How do I make it more flexible to be able to get an additional source of revenue or anything like that? But there's ways to do it.
That's great. So let me come to you personally. What motivates you to sort of keep going, keep building? Because you have a lot of businesses that you're building concurrently. Aside everything you've achieved in corporate America, even in the government, coming down to Ghana, and then now you're sort of building everything from ground up. Where's the motivation coming from? Where's the drive coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very transparent with you. I want every Ghanaian to have the same opportunities that I have. I know my kids are going to have those opportunities. What drives me is, waking up every day to be able to see someone like me. I grew up in Nima. I grew up in Nima. Not many people grow up in Nima.
And then get to that height.
You know what I mean? So that to me is a motivation. There's not a day, and you can ask, and I'm being very transparent with you, you can ask anybody around me, there's not a day that we don't talk about, all right, how can we make things easier for the average Ghanaian to be able to do X, Y, and Z, right? Someone in Nima to do X, Y, and Z, to give them those opportunities to be able to grow, to go to school, how do we address some of those problems? It got to the point where I was like, okay, I can't sit there and watch the government talk about what they can do and possibly not able to do. I have the means to be able to do it. I'm going to do it, right? And that's what I've been doing. And that to me, that's the drive. My family's okay. My kids are fine. They will be fine. They'll continue to be fine. I'm fine. But it's not okay for me to fly down, spend 2 weeks in Ghana, go do whatever, and go visit, these communities that I grew up in, and there are people that don't have an opportunity to go to school.
Yeah.
Kids that should be in school are out on the street selling water or whatever.
Yeah.
Parents that can't afford all of these different things, places to live and sleep, food to eat, and all of these things. Those are incredible challenges.
Yeah.
Those are survival challenges that you can't. I can't sit there and say, well, it's just that nobody has the attitude or opportunity to do it. No, if I can do something about it, I'll do it. Everyone that is employed in Adjuma, we look at that, right? Do you meet the values and the morals of what we are trying to accomplish as an organization?
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about we want to create a product or make money and business and all of that. It's, do you believe that what you're doing is going to be a differentiator in your communities?
Yeah.
Right? Are you going to be part of that change agent movement to help improve your community, to help your neighbors and all of that? We vet all of that through the interviews, right? So everyone that's on the team knows that, understands that we make decisions not because it's just solely beneficial for the business, but because sometimes the community needs are much more important.
Great. So let's say there's a case that you were in Ghana, you went abroad, you came back, and then you did this. There are a lot of Ghanaians or even Black Americans who are also trying to come down and then build something. If there is anything, like if somebody reached out to you like, oh, you have done it, you are being successful at it, what would you tell them, like in terms of things they should look out for coming down to build locally, especially when the culture here is quite different? I mean, we hear the government always talk about, you come down, come and build, like, we would incentivize things, and then they come and then the reality on ground is way different. It's like you have to pay some bribes, you have to talk to some people. Like, what would be the advice? What would be like an opener that you give to these people to be very much aware as they come to build here?
Yeah, look, I would say be patient more than anything else, right? If you've never lived in Ghana or in Africa in general, if you didn't grow up and much of that exposure, you need to understand that you have to be patient. Sometimes some of these ideas and functions that are much quick to come to and get solved in the West doesn't work that way here. Ghana is a relationship-based economy. It's a relationship-based anything, right? If you need anything done,
You need to know something.
you need to have that relationship. You need to know somebody. Now, some people may pay for it. Some people don't necessarily have to pay for it. But you need to understand that there's a balance there, right? It's okay. Can I pay 50 Ghana cedi to get something done and get it done? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But would I pay 1,000 Ghana cedi, 10,000 Ghana cedis for something? Absolutely not, right? So there's a balance, to it. But you have to be patient. And then you also have to understand there's some level of customization that needs to happen. What works for someone in the US, in Europe, may not necessarily work for a Ghanaian, right? Or someone sitting in Nigeria or anything like that. So you need to customize these ideas to make sure that it works, right? You understand the market insights that you're going to come into and the people that you're trying to design a product and the value that you want to bring. It's very important that you do that, especially if this is not where you grew up. I had the benefit of growing up here. My family is very well known, right? In the communities that I grew up in. So we, I learned to navigate in some of these relationships to be able to get set up, but not to the point where I feel like I'm paying somebody to bribe or anything like that. We don't do that. But it's still a relationship. There's a respect in our society. It's a formal respect structure that everyone needs to understand, right? On how to talk to elders and people that you don't know and all of those things. Those are basics. But don't come here thinking that oh my God, there's all the money to be made. I'm gonna be a greedy capitalist and come here and do that. No, that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
We still care about people. We still care about having a balanced work-life balance, right? People, you come here during Christmas, holidays, most Ghanaians have taken time off, right? Because it's needed. They need to reset and reconnect with their families. Those are important. May not necessarily exist out in the West, but here it does. The family unit and the community is very important, right? So you need to understand how your business fits into that. My team always hear me say, like, I drive around Accra and I see, this luxury building is being built. Building.
You said that.
$75,000, $100,000. How many Ghanaians can afford that?
Who's paying for them?
Who's paying for that?
I've been wanting to do a story on that, like, because I've seen like a lot of units that are actually not occupied.
Yeah.
They've been there for like a long time, but then they keep building stuff.
They keep building stuff, right? And it's just like, who's paying for those?
Yeah.
Right? So to me, that is a mindset of, someone that just wants to make money or hide money, right? They come and they build these things and all that. That doesn't benefit the average Ghanaian.
True.
Right? So you have to think about that. You have to think about, how is your business supporting the community? And are you okay to know that you're not gonna make billions of dollars, initially, right? But the impact that you're gonna make is what's important.
It's more of like the reality of goodness, not the perception of it.
Not the perception of it at all. If I cared about, how much money we're making, we turn over every year over year, a lot of these things that we're doing, like that's not a good business mindset. But that's not it, right? I'm looking down the line and say, okay, 10 years from now, the opportunities that I'm giving people today to work for in my company, opportunities for them to work in other companies, they are the people that are going to grow this economy and this society and so on and so forth. They're going to gain experiences that we are going to need as a country to diversify and grow this in this country. So that's just me. That's just the way that I think, what benefits me. And anyone that wants to come, bring your business, bring your ideas. We as business leaders in these communities, we need to start to come together and say, okay, how do we create infrastructure to allow for new ideas or new entrepreneurs when they come in, there's a structure for them, to be able to do that, right? But not just them that are coming in. There are people here
trying to
have ideas.
So hard.
You know what I mean? Half of my team is always pitching ideas to me every week that they've been thinking about, right? But there's no resources, there's no capital, none of that. So how do we support them to get these ideas out? And then how do you support the ones that are coming in too? Those things are important.
We have a lot of young people completing university, coming out of the university. What would you say that they should look out for as they enter the job market?
It's in the sense of like, how
of like getting a job or the kind of skills they should probably pay attention to.
Look, I'd say, from my experience working with folks here in Ghana more than anything else, if you're coming out of school, be very curious. What do I mean by that? Asking a lot of questions about, hey, what is the business? How are you successful? What are successful? What are the challenges? What are the risks? Ask those questions. Be curious.
Not to cut you off. I think that our culture is we are not used to being adventurous in the sense that people are not willing to pivot from what they majored in school, especially when it's not working.
When it's not working. And that's the other thing I was gonna say, right? Be curious in the sense that you may have to learn something completely different than what you're doing in school, right? And that's okay, because that's what the market requires for you to do. You will be much more successful being a chameleon and adapting to the different challenges that comes to you in this environment than someone that just wants to do the same thing over and over, right? If it's not working, learn to pivot. You pivot and continue to pivot until you find a place, that works. The worst thing that you can do is stop, right? That's the worst thing that you could do in anything, right? And just say, I give up. No. You don't know, maybe that next move is gonna be that move that's just gonna catapult you to the next heights, right? But be curious, be absolutely curious. Take your job seriously. Take your job seriously. As not serious that the task may be, you take it seriously as a professional, right? If you end up at that watch seller and she asks you to go wash the dishes, take that seriously, right? Make sure there's hot water, make sure you put it in, all the oil is out, you put in the soap, take that seriously. Because what that does is it prepares you for the workforce, right? Because then your boss will know, okay, if I give this thing to you, it's gonna be done. Yeah. Take that seriously.
Okay. What's one thing you would change about Ghana, if you had the chance?
If I had a time, there's plenty of things that I would love to change about Ghana.
The most prominent.
The most prominent, man, that's tough. There's so many in it. I don't want to be politics. I'll leave politics aside. But look, if there's one thing that I would change in Ghana, I would say, we have to do a better job in talent understanding that, time is money.
Sure.
Right? That Ghana man time, that gotta go. Like that has to go, right? Like
it feels like it's ingrained.
It's so difficult, right? I wake up at 7. If I have a meeting at 9, I want to be there at 9 o'clock, not 12 o'clock, not 11 o'clock. Like if it's 9, it's 9.
Yeah, right? my personal philosophy is that if somebody gives you a time, be there on time, because it's a showmanship of respect.
That's respect
to the person.
Simple.
So coming here today, I left home 9:40.
Yeah. And
when I was getting here and it was getting to 12, I was beating myself in the car. Bro, just speed, right?
But at least you and I were in communication, right? So even if you tell me, hey, look, I'm stuck in traffic or something, right? But some people wouldn't say anything, right? So I always show up early, earlier than when the time is supposed to be, right? Always show up early, and I'll sit there. Like even today, right? My driver, I was ready at I think 9:30. He's like, all right, I'm on the way. Didn't show up for 2 hours. And I'm sitting there. I'm like,
what's going on?
What's going on? So now, all the meetings that we have today shifted a little bit, right? Because we have to do this interview and all these different things, right? It's just like, okay. But those are the things, right? Time is money and it's respect, right? So you can't expect someone to sit there an hour, right? After 15 minutes, that meeting is done, right? If nobody shows up, that meeting, we have to find another time. So that's the one thing that I would change more than. That's the most annoying, thing for me personally and professionally, right? It needs to change. Like I had a meeting yesterday. We drove there. We got there 30 minutes early. We decided, all right, we're gonna go to the pizza man, chicken man, and go sit and cool down while we wait for that meeting. The meeting was at 3 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, the person that we meet is like, hey, I had an emergency, I had to go home, and I'm not gonna be able to make it because it's raining outside.
At 3?
At 3, right? It's raining outside, I can't make it. Can we do tomorrow morning? And that's why I remember, I sent you a message. I was like, hey, can we move this? Right? Because that meeting yesterday was impacting my schedule today. Because it's like, why would you do that? And because it's raining? Are you serious? So that. I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.